What's up everybody, Nate here, and the Great Resignation has pretty much changed everything we've come to know about our United States economy and our labor market. I mean, in the summer of 2021, we had around 4 million people voluntarily quit their jobs, and it didn't end there. By November 2021, another 4.5 million people quit their jobs, and that was an all-time record. Now in 2022, businesses and corporations are struggling because they can't find anybody to fill positions. However, a lot of them have completely stopped trying to fill positions and have instead started investing billions of dollars into alternatives like AI. Amazon, Google, and Meta, formerly Facebook, have invested billions of dollars in 2022 to try to advance their technology and completely change their labor force. So today I want to talk all about the Great Resignation and our labor force in the United States and what are the possible implications of these companies investing billions of dollars into artificial intelligence technology. But before I break all of this down, do me a quick favor and smash it or destroy that thumbs up button below. And while you're at it, hit that notification bell too. Those two things are completely free and they show me that you like this video and that you want to see even more just like it. Thank you so much for doing that. Now let's talk all about AI and our Great Resignation. So in the United States right now, we have record unemployment. So unemployment is around 3.9%. That's the lowest it's been since the 1960s. So the majority of Americans are employed. However, that number doesn't really reflect our entire employment picture in the United States. There is another number that we need to look at here, and that is called maximum employment. Maximum employment basically measures how many people in the United States are able to work, and then how many people of that number are actually working. So by the end of 2021, we ended up having around 10 million job postings. And there was around 3 to 5 million people who were looking for a job or who did not have a job. These are all of the millions of people in the United States who have been quitting their jobs voluntarily, an issue that has been amplified by our pandemic and culture today. To set the stage for you, millions of people are quitting their jobs for a variety of different reasons. One of those reasons is because of lack of pay. We know that inflation hit a new 40-year high of around 7% back in December 2021. What that means is the price of everything in our economy on average went up by 7%. However, real wages in the United States actually went down by 2.4%, which means even though some people were able to get a small raise in 2021, they didn't actually make any more money. They actually lost money because inflation was so high. So millions of Americans are quitting their jobs so they can find a new job that's going to pay them more money so they can afford all of the things that they want or need. Number two, during the pandemic and even before the pandemic, employers were not treating their employees right. And the pandemic kind of amplified that because we had a ton of restrictions and a lot more things that workers had to take on a day-to-day basis. Workers are kind of fed up right now with bad companies. Some of these bad companies are working employees to the bone. And on top of not getting enough pay, they're also not getting the recognition that they deserve. So people are ultimately quitting their jobs because companies are kind of bad. I know. Shocker. Number three, a lot of people during the pandemic realized that they wanted to put passion before a paycheck. Think about it. When the pandemic first started, there was millions of people who were out of work. The unemployment rate in 2020 was around 15%. We haven't seen an unemployment rate that high since the Great Depression. Now, it eventually started to go back down, and now we have a record low unemployment rate. So people were out of work, and they were out of work for sometimes months at a time. This was in 2020 and in parts of 2021. We had millions of people out of work, and they were basically bored because the vast majority of them, they were still receiving a ton of money, enough money to continue their same standard of living. The federal government ended up printing trillions of dollars in stimulus, and this stimulus money was eventually trickled down to the American consumer. Americans were still getting money, so they didn't have to focus on paying their bills or getting a new job. So with so many months off and Americans basically doing whatever they wanted, when the pandemic started to let up a little bit and they eventually had to return to work, well, Americans discovered that they hated their job and they wanted to quit immediately. But that's kind of part of the issue here, because Americans were able to save a ton of money over the last 2 years. All of these stimulus payments, while a lot of Americans ended up spending this money, a good portion of Americans saved this money. We saw saving rates hit new record highs in 2020. A lot of Americans put this money away in an emergency fund in case they lost their job, or in this case, in case they decided to quit. Not only that, but we had programs like the mortgage moratorium and federal student loan payments that were ultimately paused and are still paused until May of 2022. So Americans don't have to spend money on mandatory payments that are massive chunks of their monthly bills. They also saved a ton of money from all of that free stimulus cash. Now they have thousands of dollars that they can fall back on and quit their job and now go search for a new job. And that is what kind of leads us into what's going on today. So now thousands of companies all throughout the country don't have anybody to work. They're not able to do their part in inflation because they can't fill positions to make more products. Part of the reason we have such high inflation is because of our supply chain issues. Millions of Americans are not working. And if they're not working, then these companies can't produce more in order to meet demand. Now, most people think that the solution would be to just pay workers more and offer better benefits and better working conditions. And for the most part, that is definitely a solution. However, most of these companies and businesses are not doing that. Instead, they're investing money into AI systems and eliminating positions all throughout the country. Basically, what you have is a robot flipping burgers or a robot running algorithms instead of an accountant. Now, these companies are able to save a ton of money because these robots don't need to get paid. All they need is maintenance and updates, and that's pretty much it. It saves companies a ton of money because think about it, if you have 10 employees, even if they don't make that much money, say right around minimum wage, well, after a few years, that is ultimately going to become $1 million investment for a business. If businesses can save that money, then they don't really care if people aren't putting in for their positions anymore. They're making a ton of money and they don't care what inflation is either. This means day after day, a lot of those positions in the United States are completely going away. And what that ultimately means is our economy is going through one of the biggest shifts in workplace culture that it has ever seen. The big shift means that a lot of these unskilled and jobs that don't bring a ton of value to companies are going away, which means Americans are going to need to be a lot more skilled and educated in order to get a job in general. Now, there are some pros and cons to that in our society. The pros is that we're going to have a more educated workforce, especially if that becomes the baseline. If a lot of these jobs end up disappearing completely, well, then you have no choice but to get a higher education degree or get some sort of certification of training. It is now a necessity to have a skill, and that is something that is particularly new in the United States. High-paying jobs before, you didn't necessarily have to have a high skill level. You just needed to be willing to put in the work. However, with AI taking over, it might not be like that anymore. Generations of the future won't have a lot of those low-ranking positions in order to work anymore. You'll have to have a higher skill. Now, this is very interesting because on one hand, like I said, your workforce is way more educated. However, that's going to lead to some major oversaturation in a lot of markets. The majority of Americans will do what's easy instead of what's hard. So a lot of those easy to get degrees and easy to get jobs are going to become abundant, and those are going to become the jobs that are the most lower paying. Even though right now those positions might pay you way more than is above average, eventually they're all going to get snatched up. And it might eventually take our entire labor force in general and bring it down a complete notch. So the pay for everybody might ultimately decrease because everybody has a baseline skill and education level of high school or college or something similar. In addition, it's going to change how jobs operate from a day-to-day basis because you're going to have robots and AI doing all of that work. For the most part, it's teenagers doing a lot of the work in these retail stores. That is definitely not 100% the case, as on one hand, not every teenager works, and on the other hand, not everybody in these retail stores are teenagers. However, a lot of them are, and speaking from personal experience here, this was one of the first jobs that I actually had. I didn't work in retail, but I worked in a grocery store, and everybody around me was a similar age, 15, 16, and 17. For small businesses, this might still be the case in the future, but for your big corporations, they're not going to hire your 16, 17, and 18-year-olds anymore because those stores are run by robots. Now, if you want to work at Kohl's or you want to work at Walmart or any of these other big corporations, you're going to be working in the office or as a manager somewhere, but you won't actually be doing the day-to-day work in those stores. Not only are big corporations and businesses right now investing billions of dollars into AI to help with the Great Resignation, but it's also to help boost their chances of success in the metaverse. Day by day, our economy and world is getting more digitized and is being almost completely lived online. From the way that we learn to the way that we are entertained, it is all done on the internet. The metaverse is set to expand that even more. Companies are going to need AI systems in order to run that. Now, how is companies switching to complete AI for a lot of their jobs going to affect our economy in 2022 and beyond? Well, this is going to have some really bad growing pains for our economy because in the short term, the United States is going to continue to lose jobs, and we've seen this over the past few decades. From the auto market to restaurants, jobs are basically disappearing and being replaced by algorithms or robots, which means somebody that has worked in an auto factory for their entire life may suddenly lose their job to a robot. That is not a good feeling. And to be honest with you, it sucks. It sucks that it has to be that way. But in order for our civilization to continue to advance, technology needs to advance. And these corporations and businesses are not going to lose money if they don't have to. They're going to move to those robotic systems because that could be one of the best ways to save some cash. So in the short term, it's gonna sting. But potentially in the long term, this could have some really good benefits for our economy and world in general. The reason being is kind of twofold. For one, those jobs that are being eliminated are not good jobs to begin with. For the vast majority of Americans that work these jobs, they don't work them because they love to flip burgers at McDonald's. They work them because they have to. It's a paycheck. With that not even being an option, that leads Americans to possibly go into a career that they're actually passionate about. They don't have to settle for those low jobs anymore. They don't have to settle for a job that they hate. They can immediately go into something that they love because those are the only jobs available. And two, it could lead to a lot more people having more money. Because some of those jobs require a lot more skill and education, the ones that are able to get those skills and education are possibly going to get paid more. That could lead to more wealth building opportunities and a much healthier workforce. However, that is for the people who are able to afford these skills and education. We have a long way to go. And if people that can't afford to get extra skills or education can't get these jobs, well, they also can't get jobs that have disappeared either. That could be a big problem because now you have millions of Americans who aren't able to get jobs at all and are permanently unemployed. So that's going to come down to our education system at that point. What are we willing to teach people and how much does education cost and experience cost in the future? But with companies having a lot less jobs in general, that could mean prices go down too, which means inflation might start to decrease in the United States just naturally. Companies will have to pay people a standard of living based on inflation, but they will only have a certain amount of employees because that's all they need. It really just depends on what goes down with corporate greed at this point, because we all know what some companies do when they have an excess of profits. But this is how the capitalism system works in the United States. Capitalism as a system tries to make things as efficient as possible, and sometimes that could mean jobs are eventually cut. An ever-growing population and an increasingly more complex society, though, needs these technological advancements. We need technology to continue to build, or else we're going to have massive disparities throughout our country. Luckily though, the more people that are born and the more people that we have on our planet, we will hopefully be able to figure out a lot of the problems that we're facing today. But the bottom line here is that our labor force is changing, and it's going through one of the biggest shifts that we have ever seen. These types of shifts though are most likely going to become more common as our society advances though. But let's just say for now though, the great AI shift has begun, and no one is immune to the changes. But now I want to hear from you on this issue. What do you think about big companies like Amazon, Google, and Meta investing billions of dollars into AI technology this year? Is this shift to AI actually a good thing for our workforce, or is it going to cause catastrophic issues to our economy this year and in the future? Whatever your thoughts are, be sure to leave a comment below before you go. But that is it for me, everyone, and I hope you liked this video. If you did, be sure to hit that subscribe button below. Be kind out there, and I'll see you all in the next one.